Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I'm your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you are new here, welcome, and if you are returning here, welcome. Just to let you know, if you would like to subscribe to text notifications of when I go live, you can text the words Dana Live, but all one word, to the number 22999. So that's Dana Live to the number 22999. We also have a different, or I guess a newer thing that we're doing. If you're needing some words of encouragement, kind of throughout the week. We're sending out messages roughly about 3 times a week. And you can sign up for those text messages by texting the words I thrive, all one word, I thrive, to the number 22999. So, with that said, let's see. Okay, I'm going to write a quick message in the chat because we had issues with this yesterday and see if that helps anything. Oh boy. I hope we can get the chat to work. Zoom and YouTube are doing some strange things. So we'll see. Oh, also, I wanted to mention I was going to be doing book club tomorrow night. So if anybody's interested, the book that I'll be discussing is called Stop Walking on Eggshells, and it's a book about borderline personality disorder. So, uh, yes, there's lots I have to say about it. It's my notes are extensive. I will try to pare them down before tomorrow night. But if you're interested in joining book club, it'll be at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, and it'll just be me tomorrow night, and we'll go from there. So, okay, good. People are able to get into the chat and message. So UNA is here. Jamie is here. Welcome, welcome. And while we're waiting for some more people to join us, let me pull up questions that people had emailed me for the live stream. And I guess I should add that too. If you have a question that you would like answered on the live stream, you can email me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com and ask your question, but make sure to let me know what name that you'd like for me to use on the air. So, okay, with that said, first question is signed urgently wanting to leave and feeling trapped. And this person asks, is it appropriate to Grayrock if you live with a toxic family member with whom anything you say to her gets makes her real snarky and she misconstrues your positive intent? She triangulates me by talking in a negative light with other family members and messes with my husband and child too. Since we are temporarily living with her and I just don't engage in order to self-protect. So now I barely engage or react. I ask routine questions like, how are you? Since I'm empathetic and can get easily flustered or dragged down just by her mere presence. And yes, I'm trying to move as soon as possible, but it's been 4 years of hell. So my response to this question is it appropriate to Grayrock if you live with a toxic family member? Yes, absolutely. Because reality is, what is your other option? And for people that are new here, it's probably worth some time going back and revisiting what the concept of gray rock is. Gray rock is a term that somebody within the narcissistic abuse community coined, and I forget who did. So if you remember who coined this term, let me know so I can give them proper credit. But she coined this term gray rock. So basically, what it is, it's where we are as emotionally unreactive and exciting as a gray rock, which is to say, not at all. So, kind of very bland, very observant, but not reactive. There's that level of emotional detachment there. Conversations are kept at a surface level. They're pleasant, they're polite, but they're brief. We're not openly sharing, deep personal things about ourselves. We're not, um, you're not wanting to give this person any more ammunition to use against you, kind of a thing. So, yeah, whenever we're in a situation with anybody that is, especially if they're triangulating, if they're abusive, toxic, they're, kind of showing that they're actively working against us, whether they intend to or not. But if their behavior is such that communication doesn't get through to them, um, they're just, uh, yeah, they're just kind of a difficult or a high conflict personality, then yeah, great going gray rock is a great way to go. So I also wanted to add, I've seen some people talk about gray rock in terms of being um, emotionally reactive or sticking to boring topics that are completely unrelated. And I just wanted to add that you don't have to do that. So you don't have to, if they're talking to you about whatever, they're wanting to get information about you and your day or things that you don't want to share with them, you can change the topic. uh, you don't have to just go so far left that you're talking about things that are just bizarre and completely left field. For example, I've heard some people say, "Oh yeah, I've been going gray rock." Whenever their ex or a family member starts talking to them, they'll switch the topic to like the laundry or taxes. You can do that, but you don't have to, I guess is what I'm saying. It's whatever topic that you feel comfortable with. So. Yes, UNA says, yeah, it sounds like the book club chat would be great for anyone dealing with a toxic person that makes you feel as though you need to walk on eggshells for any reason, not just borderline personality disorder. Yes, yes, absolutely. It's, um, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit tomorrow night. Yeah, I think it's a great book. I should say, okay, the first 3 quarters of the book really go into a lot of depth about manipulative behavior and, um, kind of a wide variety of information about borderline personality disorder. The last 25% or so of the book is about boundary setting. And, um, yeah, I have quite a bit to say on this book. I don't wanna ruin it, but we'll definitely talk about it tomorrow. I think most people can benefit from the discussion surrounding boundaries because this stuff's not taught. And, um, most of us tend to think that, "Oh, yeah, I've got my boundaries are fine," um, until we're shown otherwise. Or some people might think, "Oh, yeah, my boundaries are fine. It's just the other person that has the problem." If they just quit being abusive or if they just quit drinking or if they just quit doing whatever they were doing that's a problem, then things would be fine. So, yeah, lots of stuff to dive into with that one. Okay, so for the next comment here, this is from Ava, who says, I had an aha moment I wanted to share regarding deal breaking behavior. I've replaced deal breaking behavior with a person coughing in the example below. If someone has a cough, it's a symptom of something. This I know. It could be a cold, a flu, bronchitis, or something else. It's important to understand that a cough is a symptom for something, and it is not my responsibility to understand why the other person is coughing. It's unhealthy for me to stay close to that person to figure out the level of sickness that they have. To tell myself, oh, well, if it's a cold, then that will heal quickly and it isn't a big deal. The point is, the longer I spend in close proximity to that person, the higher the chances I will catch whatever it is that they have, making me sick in the process. Before the narcissist in my life, when someone would have a cough, I would try to understand why. Could it be their childhood? And by cough, of course, means like problematic behavior. Could it be their childhood? Are they having a bad day? Maybe I misheard and it was actually my anxiety. Spending the better part of the last year understanding boundaries, uh, I finally realized cerebrally what boundaries are. It is not my responsibility to spend time with someone trying to understand why they do what they do. If they have an issue, it's their responsibility to go get help for that. Similarly, with boundary crosses, it is not my responsibility to understand why they did what they did. If there is a repeated offense, it's a symptom of disrespect. And it actually makes no sense to stay to figure out why I'm being disrespected. Yes, absolutely. Bingo. Um, but what really tripped me up was the narcissist in my life would take responsibility for his behaviors, but it was fake. But I mean, how could I have known that at the time? Um, it was a lot of confusion. And now I understand why confusion in itself is a deal breaker for me now. And I love that. I love that. So we have talked about this the concept of confusion, I think, is a very pivotal point for many, many survivors. And understanding that if you tighten up your boundaries, instead of waiting for concrete proof of, well, I don't know if they're cheating. They have a bunch of squirrely behavior that all kind of points to the direction that they're cheating, but I don't have concrete proof. Or I think they're up to something, but I don't have concrete proof. And so what a lot of people do is they tend to wait around until that concrete proof presents itself. Well, the problem with that is if we're waiting for concrete proof that there is in fact a problem, then we've more than likely we've waited for too long and things are a really big problem. It's like if your house is on fire. You don't need to see flames, like having your smoke alarm go off, having it be smoky in there, hearing strange sounds, smelling strange things. All of that's a problem too. So we don't need to see the flames in order to realize, oh, maybe I need to get out of here. It's the same thing in a relationship. So if perpetual confusion is present, or if there's behavior that somebody is doing that's just not okay with you, we don't have to know for sure, hey, are they embezzling funds? Are they hurting my child? Are they in fact, cheating on me? It doesn't matter. That whatever that problematic behavior that you're experiencing, if that's something that you either can't bring up to them or it goes unresolved, or they say that it's resolved, but then it's not, they just get better at hiding it. That's all deal breaker behavior. That's all deal breaker stuff. So and I really like what Ava had to say about if somebody repeatedly crosses your boundaries, it's a symptom of disrespect. And it makes no sense to stay and figure out why I'm being disrespected. Bingo. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if they were having a bad day, a bad childhood, a bad parent, a bad, a rock in their shoe, all of that. If it keeps happening and you keep being treated with disrespect, then there has to come a point where it's like, you know what? There's no justification for this. And hopefully we can come to that point sooner than later, realizing these are my boundaries. I expect to be treated with dignity and respect by the people in my life at all times, especially when they're frustrated and angry. And if they keep really crossing those lines, then I'm going to have to do something different. And maybe this isn't a relationship or friendship or work environment for me. So, okay, let me see here. Here's another question. Okay, here's a question I've had on my mind for a long time. I finally have the words to put to it. With my ex, I knew he was bad news and I shouldn't have been with him. So it not working out wasn't a shock. It was more about grieving the dream of it wanting to work. I had dropped so many people due to deal breakers that I was tired. I was tired of being single, tired of things not working out anymore, tired of explaining to people why I am still single and them thinking it's because I don't want a relationship. When I met my ex, I was done. I just settled because I was tired of searching. I don't feel like I have luck in love. What I still can't understand is why it doesn't work out for me. I'm not desperate, but I deserve like anyone else to have human affection, etc. Sometimes I wonder if there's a curse on me. I've tried going to date I've tried going on dating apps, joining sports clubs, being social, meetup.com, etc., but nothing sticks. The men I do get pursued by are not the best quality, and the ones I am interested in don't pursue me. I mean, I'm healthy, attractive, educated. I don't have any deal breaker addictions or anything like that. I just can't understand why it's been so difficult to meet a normal, decent person. It's like a rut, a predicament. It's strange. I don't want to come off as complaining. I just really don't know what to think. Thoughts? Thank you. So, yes, a couple of things. I guess one of the things that jumped out to me in this letter was um, I I would be curious to know how good you are with being assertive, and or if you're if you're just jumping to straight to deal breakers. So if somebody, because this is important, with boundaries, um, there's certain things that we just consider normal, appropriate adult behavior, right? Like kind of, again, like the basics of dignity and respect. There's just certain things that shouldn't have to be told to another person. Like it's not okay to, you know, grab somebody's crotch or to, um, call somebody pet names or, uh, I don't know, things that are kind of on the extreme. That's a problem. But other things like because our boundaries change every moment of every day. And because of that, nobody knows where our boundaries are unless we make them known. So, for example, the boundaries that you have, if you don't feel well, are going to be different than on a day that you are feeling fine. Like if I have a headache, my boundary is going to be, hey, I really need some time alone. I just need to be here in the dark, or I just don't want to be touched. I just no sound, no nothing, right? I just need to be alone. Versus if I don't have a headache, I might be a lot more social. Um, and we have different boundaries with different people too. So the boundaries that you might have with a close friend versus a parent versus a coworker are generally going to be different. Um, so what I've seen a lot of survivors do, myself included, is when they start learning about boundaries, standards, and deal breakers, they and this is why I also refer to this as kind of getting your sea legs. So we tend to go from one side of the spectrum way to the opposite side. So on that one side of the spectrum, there tends to be kind of this struggle with boundaries. We don't know, we don't feel um, justified in having any. We don't know what they are. We are very quick to give in. We're very quick to let other people set the pace. We operate based off of fear, obligation, and guilt. These kinds of things. We're just not aware of the physical connection and the emotional connection of when our boundaries are crossed. So they're getting crossed all the time. When we start learning about this, we tend to go to the opposite other side, which is deal breakers. And so anybody that does anything that we don't like, it can be a very quick, oh, I'm done. I'm done. And we can think, okay, this is what setting boundaries looks like. When, and again, it depends on the situation. If it's definitely, very clearly egregious behavior, absolutely. Like you don't owe anybody any explanation or anything. If somebody's making you uncomfortable, if something's extreme, whatever, it's okay to leave. But if it's more in that middle ground of uh, kind of just the differences between two people, and you kind of think that person's intentions are good, then the middle ground there is to be assertive and to bring it up. And that that level of effective communication and emotional maturity for both people involved is vital to making a relationship of any degree, friendship, whatever, work. So that could be part of it, that you're jumping straight to deal breakers. But again, I'm not there. I don't know. So I guess I would encourage you to examine some of your assertive behavior. And if you are assertive uh, early on and again, because I'm not there, I guess I would encourage you to go back through, let's say I don't know, the most recent relationships you've had, and um, write out kind of what attracted you about to this person or to this relationship, why you stayed, and some of the reasons things ended. So, and then start circling any patterns that you see. So that can be very telling because sometimes if we just keep all this stuff in our head, it can seem like, oh, these are very unrelated. And then putting it on paper, it's like, oh my gosh, kind of the common theme here is, um, I was very quick to not want to discuss things with other people, or I found myself in certain relationships because I was lonely, or um, yeah, whatever it might be. So that can help you to kind of get some insight onto what's going on there. Um, okay, here's another question from Adern, who asks, I've been in a long distance relationship for almost 3 months. So far, my boyfriend has shown signs of emotional empathy and remorse. He's consistent, kind, respects my boundaries, and we have excellent communication. We talk about everything. We both talked about our limits, things that we're not going to tolerate in a relationship. For example, silent treatment, ghosting, any kind of abuse, cheating, etc. He knows that I am a survivor of rape and narcissistic abuse, and he knows that I suffer from CPTSD. He told me that I should be proud that I managed to survive despite everything I've been through, and he is not afraid. Um, uh, and he's not afraid. He introduced me to his mother and his friends, and we are planning to meet them for the first time, or I'm planning to meet them for the very first time when the travel restrictions will be lifted. He's coming to visit me. He's making plans for our future together, but he's grounded and logical. For example, he recognizes that we have to meet in order to confirm our feelings. He is willing to move to my country if this is something that I would like to, but he understands that we're not there yet, etc. So here's the $1,000,000 question. How can I tell the difference between a narcissist who is using future faking tactics and a man with empathy and conscience who is really in love with me and he's making plans for the future because he genuinely wants me there? How can I know 100%? Does consistency play a role? Please, please, if you can, give me some wisdom on this subject because I can't find an answer anywhere online. Again, thank you so much for everything. So, that future faking can be a little difficult to suss out. Normally, I think to see it clearly, it kind of takes us realizing, oh, uh, this person's words and actions don't line up, and we can kind of see, oh, this person, and they might even be, in part, be lying to themselves. So they might be caught up in that fantasy of that idealization stage of the relationship with you. And um, sometimes it's not always like intentional and malicious. Sometimes it's that person engaging in that fantasy too, which is still a problem. But like you said, consistency plays a large part. If he's consistently, shown that he has empathy and remorse. And let me back up a little bit. The issue here isn't whether or not he's a narcissist. The issue is whether or not um, he has problematic behavior, and to what degree. And the reality is, if he's human, there's going to be, at a minimum, there's going to be differences that surface. That's normal and healthy in a relationship. So it's about how those differences are handled when they do surface. Um, so, I mean, so far it sounds good. I love the fact that you guys can talk about anything and everything. Um, future faking, it's going to kind of, based on what you said, my concern would be more about uh, kind of the fantasy that the two of you have with your life together versus the reality, because I think it's impossible to have anything other than a fantasy when you're doing long distance dating. You, even if you're spending time together on Zoom, all of that, the um, your brain is kind of creating this picture of what it thinks your life is going to be like with this person. And this is why it's so important to spend time with them in person, and to just to be with them on a day-to-day basis and see how things go. How do they handle um, your boundaries? How do you handle their boundaries? Um, how do the two of you handle conflict and confrontation? How do they handle being frustrated and angry, and vice versa? So there, there's just lots of things. It's kind of one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to actually experience it. So I would encourage the two of you to go slow. Um, I wouldn't rush to move to another country. I would see if whoever's wanting to go wherever to spend a significant amount of time together and, you know, just kind of move slow. But I think you can tell a lot about the true chemistry of a person, more so kind of when things are going rough than when things are going well. Because when things are going well, I mean, it's kind of smooth sailing. And hopefully there is that some degree of chemistry there where you have at least some of the things in common. It's when frustration, differences, anger, um, you know, when a person kind of gets activated in certain ways, that it is very telling. And that's where relationships are either made or broken. Angela, okay, asks, "Hey Dana, how can I set boundaries after a breakup? He's always making me feel bad for him, like I'm abandoning him." Well, I guess my question is, why are you still talking to him? Are you guys friends, or um, what's the circumstance there? So, and actually, people in the chat are bringing up some great points I didn't even think about. Monica had asked, how long ago did you meet this guy talking to Ava? And somebody mentioned, well, what country is he coming from? Is it a green card situation, maybe? Yeah, I guess I would want to know that too. Is uh, how long have you guys been talking? Because it is very common for online dating scammers to come across as everything you've ever wanted. And like they have empathy and remorse and all of this. I mean, are you doing Zoom? Are you doing Zoom calls with them or FaceTimes? Um, you know, you really want to kind of vet this person well. So, yeah. Okay, Angela. Angela says, I guess I just feel bad ignoring him. Yeah, I can understand that. But at the same time, it takes two people for a relationship to work. And generally, when a person has all of this guilt at the end of a relationship, it tends to be because they're placing 100% of making the relationship work on them. And so it's sort of like, well, gosh, I just feel so bad and it didn't work out. And now, he or she's so sad. And I just, I care about them as a person. I just don't have there's no future there, that kind of thing. Um, so it can help to kind of relieve yourself of some of the guilt by realizing it's the work of making this, well, yeah, the kind of onus of making this relationship work is not 100% on you. So, and you also don't need to be 100% responsible for him or his healing, or frankly, any percent. That's on him. So I know that you do care, but if these messages, it's constantly guilt and this, that, and the other, um, I would just either make it very clear of I'm really concerned about you. I'm sorry that you're taking the ending of this relationship so hard. I really hope that you're able to get the support and healing that you need. But I can't. Um, I'm feeling a lot of guilt when I'm getting messages like that, and this isn't healthy for me. So, and if you don't have, if there's no desire to have a friendship there, then I wouldn't even add in that last part. I would just say, I really hope that you're able to get the support and healing that you need. And I wish you all the best. And then send the text message and then block and be done with it. Okay. Ava said, "Did I miss my question again?" Yes, yes, you did. I just finished just finished them. We did have some questions for you though, Ava. This guy that you've met online that's in a different country, have you been doing FaceTime and Zoom with him? I mean, have you seen him on camera? Um, what country are you in? What country is he in? Is there any concern at all that this is like an online dating scam? I guess how did you guys meet if he's in another country? Monica says, I was in a bad car accident on 12/15, discovered my chiropractor was overcharging my insurance by 4 times. When I called him out on it, his office manager blame shifted it onto me. Crazy. Yeah, that's what they do. I was watching a really fantastic like crime, like true crime type video earlier today, and it was this really awful, wild story of this uh, husband and wife that were newlyweds, and they just got this idea that they were going to kill someone. They didn't know this guy. It was just the craziest thing. Well, anyways, so they end up killing this guy. The police bring the wife in, and it's a young couple. They're in their early 20s. The whole thing is just so strange, um, and horrific. They bring the wife in, and they basically say, "Hey, you know what? This guy's phone number was your number was the last one he dialed. We're going to need to take your phone." And this is all very suspicious. We kind of need to get to the bottom of it. She is like so many people when they're caught in a lie, they panic and they don't know what else to do. And so um, all they really can do is just get loud and try to get intimidating because they don't have the truth on their side. So um, uh, there's a saying in a friend of mine told me a long time ago about that she learned in law school, something like if you have the law, you pound on the law. If you have a debt, if you have, how does it go? If you have the law, pound on the law. If you don't have the law on your side, then you pound on the desk, something along those lines. And that's what it is. It's just escalating that behavior. Anyways, so in this true crime story, this girl gets up and she starts getting really huffy and upset with the police. I'm offended. I can't believe you wouldn't trust me. This is ridiculous. I refuse to be treated like this. And just starts throwing a fit. And, how dare they accuse her of this? And this is outrageous. And she's a single mother. And why don't they have any, compassion and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, it turns out, yeah, she murdered this guy. So, um, you know, yeah, people when they're guilty, they very rarely, unless they know that there's absolutely no way out, they tend to fight back. And so that level of defensiveness is very, very common. I wouldn't take it personally. Um, you know, I would notify your insurance company, and I would also note there's normally places where you can report insurance fraud, and that might be something to do as well. Um, let's see. Let me scroll up here. That's a very valid point. Monica was saying, I see it as a red flag that this guy Ava is talking to, that he's already talking about introducing you to his family before meeting you. Feels a bit like possible future faking. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Yep. And I was making the mistake of kind of assuming that there was more of a relationship there, but you're absolutely right. Um, Yeah. So hold on a second. Phew, excuse me. It's it's also not uncommon for dating scammers to move very quickly like that and to say things like, "Oh, you know what? My adult child wants to know who I've fallen so madly in love with, and they want to meet you, and they might even have you talk to them on the phone." Or I had an acquaintance of mine who got wrapped up in an online dating scam, and it was just the most wild thing because she was, um, an intelligent woman, but she just kept falling for it. She was lonely. She just kept falling for it time and time again. But this guy had sent her a long stem red rose, and then he said, "I'm coming to your area to meet you. You know, I just uh, you know." I can't wait to be in your arms, blah, blah, blah. Sends her pictures of airline tickets to our city. And of course, then that never surfaced. So she also never was able to FaceTime with him or Zoom. He only had a limited number of pictures that he was able to send her because it wasn't really him. And, a lot of things didn't add up. So at the end of the day, if somebody all of a sudden starts asking you for money, they start switching up plans. Um, that's especially with online date. Well, in general, frankly, but especially with online dating, it's a scam. So, and it can be very, very painful. So move at a pace that you're comfortable with. Don't let somebody else set the pace. Let's see here. Let me scroll up. Okay. Alex asks, he says, Dana, my mother was deeply narcissistic, and now I found myself abusing my wife in a narcissistic way. And despite us both talking about it, I struggle to get out of these tendencies. Help. Okay. Well, for starters, it can definitely help to identify what behaviors are problematic when you're not angry. So after the fact, when things have kind of calmed down and you and your wife are able to have like a cool, calm, collected conversation about things and getting clear for yourself, is this kind of what identifying kind of what's activating for you about this? What are you finding kind of, yeah, what's bringing out all of this anger? And um, is there a pattern there? Are you handling it in certain ways? Are you handling it differently every single time? Is it yelling? Is it cussing? Is it put downs? Is it silent treatment? What exactly is it that that you're doing? So kind of getting as clear as you can about the behavior, then you can start um, coming up with other ways to handle it. And I would encourage you to come up with other ways to handle it before it happens again. Because here's the thing with anger. When any of us get angry, it we go into fight or flight. Okay. And when we go into fight or flight mode, it's like our reptile part of our brain is activated. And that's why you see a bunch of very erratic um, and emotional and dramatic behavior. It's because we're operating from that reptilian part of our brain. The logic and critical thinking part of our brain, which is what we associate with being human, that part is like profoundly diminished, pretty much to the point that it's not there. That's why it's so difficult to kind of be reasonable and rational when we're angry. And this goes for anybody because that part of our brain is just not online. We're in survival mode. We're in fight or flight. So the way around this is to anticipate as much as you can of, okay, what in particular, as with as much clarity as you can get, what do you find upsetting? And then thinking about, okay, let's just say, for example, I don't even know. I don't know. Hopefully you'll give me an example. Uh, I'm trying to think. Let's say um, you work from home and she's constantly interrupting you, and then you find yourself getting really frustrated and just in losing your cool and being very, very speaking in a harsh tone or belittling or yelling or whatnot, that kind of thing. Um, Thinking ahead of time of, okay, if this is what's going on here, of that you really need a lot more time than she might realize, then saying when you're not upset, hun, okay, we need to figure something out. These are the hours that I really just need, complete uninterrupted time. This doesn't make you treating her, with kind of contempt, disdain, or hostility somehow okay. It's definitely not. So owning your part in that and saying, hey, you know how I was handling it? I lash out, I lose my cool. All of that is not okay. What I've come up with is that I think what I need to do differently is I really need to have this certain amount of time uninterrupted. And um, I think that'll help for you to set that boundary of whatever it is, if assuming it's an appropriate boundary, and then making that concerted effort to do something different. So those kinds of situations don't continue to happen. There's also, I would also be curious to know, do you agree with your wife when she says, "Hey, how you handled the situation is not okay"? Are you in agreement with that? There's because that's important to know if you agree, like if there is some behavior that you're aware of and that you're accountable for and that you're actively working to change. Another thought is, if you go on my website thriveafterabuse.com, you can find, and I think we're in the process of have revamping the website, so I think the page keeps changing, but if you kind of go on the menu, you'll find a thing that says book club. And right now there's only a few book club notes up there, but there's one from Patricia Evans in her book, The Verbally Abusive Relationship, which is fantastic. And it really spells out a lot of problematic behavior that tends to fly under the radar. And if a person's grown up like you have, if you've grown up in a home with a very narcissistic, kind of difficult, demanding, high conflict personality, like it sounds like you did with your mom, then getting it can be difficult to kind of understand all of the ways um, that problematic behavior can surface. So, um, yeah, there's a list in on my website, which is, I think, very helpful. It's a good starting point. So let me scroll down here and see. Um, Alex says, my way of being abusive is very covert and manipulative, and it tends to happen when something triggers me to feel shame, which triggers my wife to get angry, which creates a downward spiral. Okay. I'm trying to think of an example with all of this. Well, okay, at a minimum, it sounds like that you could benefit from, um, well, from frankly, from probably from some therapy, exploring those feelings of shame and resolving them. So, because it's not your, it's not your wife, it's your response. It's the response to how whatever she's doing is um, kind of activating you, but it's not her behavior. It's this unresolved shame that's causing the problem. So shame is toxic, and it makes people do all kinds of stuff. It's the fuel for addictions. It's the fuel for, um, you know, for all kinds of things, and it contributes to a significant amount of pain in the world. So, um, yeah, kind of examining and working through that shame is going to be significant. Lene says, yeah, not everyone is able or willing to control their anger. Yes. And this is very true. But at the same time, um, we also don't have to stand around and be somebody's verbal or emotional punching bag. So, um, everybody has it's we feel how we feel, and everybody has the right to their feelings. If a person's frustrated, angry, happy, sad, you name it, it's okay to feel how we feel, but it's not okay for us to take out anger and frustration on others. That's the line. So, and this is why it's important that if we really feel like, man, I just get so angry, everything goes black. Like if it's to that point, to then start training ourselves, then I, as an adult, need to be able to get up and do something different, because, raging on other people is absolutely not okay. It's, it's poison to relationships. So, and doing something different, and I would encourage you, here's the thing with doing something different, I would encourage you to make it something very, very easy, and not something that involves multiple steps. So a good way to do this is to get up and go to the bathroom. Get up, go to the bathroom. That way you're kind of guaranteed to be alone, right? So nobody's going to follow you in there, hopefully. And then just wash your hands. Get up, go to the bathroom, wash your hands. This will help you to just decompress, to be in the moment, to just breathe. Because trying to stay in that situation when we're feeling so activated that we're saying things we know we shouldn't say, we're doing things we know we shouldn't do, that's already past. We're like in the red zone now. And so we need to bring things way, way down to where we can be more responsive instead of so reactive. Uh, Ren- Renisha says, "Hey Dana, how do you detach from the label of being the black sheep in the family?" Um, you know, I guess here's how I look at it: is if by being the I guess first and foremost, I who cares, right? I would just embrace it. Other people think you're the black sheep. Okay, you know, but especially if it's people where kind of being the black sheep or being different means that you're not dysfunctional like them. Hey, I would consider that an honor. So like I would proudly wear that title of, oh, I'm so glad that you guys realize it too. I am nothing like you people, kind of a thing, you know? So um it's not necessarily being called a black sheep is not necessarily a bad thing, especially in dysfunctional families. I think it's something to strive for, to be the black sheep. You want to be different because that's how we break free from all of this, is doing something different. It's those that kind of stay in this cycle and circle of dysfunction, um, you know, that's the bigger problem. So and then she also asks, how about wanting to break the cycle of abuse or being codependent in romantic relationships? That's kind of a bigger question. And mm, that's a bigger question. So, with codependency, kind of the definition of codependency tends to be an excessive emotional reliance on another person. So we're looking to them to make us feel a certain way, safe, secure, loved, important, accepted, valued, all of these things. One of the big shifts that helps to break away from that is, I think, realizing that first and foremost that there is that huge imbalance there, and kind of the differences between a uh, like a codependent relationship and then a healthier or a more balanced relationship. So that codependent, well, I should say mindset. Let's start there with that more of that codependent mindset where there's that excessive emotional reliance on the other person. There's the imbalance, right? We're looking outside of ourselves for answers, for other people to make our lives work. In a more balanced mindset is one of, okay, um it's one, well, let me back up. If you think about codependence, this excessive emotional reliance, it's more of an enmeshment. It's a blurring of boundaries. If you're responsible for me, I'm responsible for you. It's this intertwining, kind of like braided rope. It's very, very interwoven. That tends to not work, and it's not healthy. Um, in a more balanced relationship, there's still that level of reliance on another person, but it's coming from a place of interdependence. So it's the ability of, hey, you know what? I can stand on my own. I'm independent in the sense of I have my own wants and needs and thoughts and feelings and opinions and hobbies, and I can make my own friendships. I know that I'm responsible for my behavior and for my feelings and for getting my needs met, all of that. For my finances, you name it, everything adult, right? That we are responsible for, independent in that sense. And then when we meet that other person who's also that level of independent, then we're able to relate with them on a more balanced field. It's not coming from a place of, oh, these are all of these parts of me that are unhealed. And I somehow need you to heal me. I had this terrible childhood. My mother didn't love me. I need you to triple up on love. I need you to fix me, or I need you to make me feel loved. Um, so when there's more balance there, there's that interdependence. Somebody once described it, and I thought this was a very good analogy. The difference is if you think about letters, at least in the English alphabet, think about letters. A codependent relationship would be more of the lowercase t. So how does that go? It's like this, right? So you've got one person standing straight up and the other person completely horizontal, like you're being carried. In a a more dependent relationship, it's more like the capital letter A, where you've got two people. If you can imagine, two people kind of leaning up to each other, and then their hands forming a bridge. So they're supporting each other. If one person moves, the other one falls. That's more of that level of kind of, to a certain extent, problematic dependence. More of that healthy interdependence is more like the capital letter H, where I'm standing on my own, I'm reaching my arms out, connecting with the other person. They're standing on their own, they're reaching their arms out, connecting their hands with mine. So we're each able to stand on our own, uh, but there isn't this excessive emotional reliance on the other person. So, kind of seeing the differences between like what balances and what imbalances are and what they look like in motion can really help. Um, yeah, yeah. A lot of people, we kind of learn these patterns of relationships and relating to others pretty early on, and so um, it can be difficult to kind of know um, how to do things different if we've never had anything, if we've never experienced anything different. So yeah, I hope that helps. Yes, Michelle says, "Hi everyone. I listened to the book The Verbally Abusive Relationship, and it helped to see the two different realities. The one is competitive and the power over, and the other one is one of co-creation or mutuality. That really helped me." Yes, that's a game changer. So what Michelle is talking about is understanding that there's two very different mindsets out there. And again, most of us, I think, are taught that kind of everybody is created equal, everybody has the same morals and motivations, and that everybody's team oriented. It's this idea of, oh, kind of be friends with everybody kind of thing. Or if there's an issue in the relationship, well, all relationships require work, so you just keep working on it. The problem is that not everybody has the same mindset or morals or motivations. And so understanding what kind of mindset you're dealing with is probably for the first step. So if in the two different mindsets are like Michelle mentioned, one of them is that it's that domination driven mindset. It's that win lose attitude. I win, you lose. It's that power over. kind of, it's always got to be my way or the highway. That's a problem in a relationship, because when you have a person that's domination driven, there is no relationship. There's only power and control there. There's only submission for the others around them. The other type of dynamic is this one of mutuality, or one of team orientedness. And that is that mentality of, hey, it's a win-win. And that we can work as a team on things. There's that ability to negotiate, compromise, and communicate. It's a two-way street instead of that domination driven mindset that it's a one-way street. So yes. Yes, good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Let's see here. Let me scroll up. UNA says, oh, Michelle, that's so wonderful. We need to throw parties when we can say no to manipulators. I'm throwing a party for you. Oh, I love it. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There is no such thing as a small victory. This is all moving forward and reclaiming yourself, which is huge and absolutely party worthy. So yay you. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll here. Jennifer says, I just started an antidepressant and an anti-anxiety medication yesterday. I was pretty terrified. I've been putting this off for a long time. I definitely noticed some effects right away. I've been more calm and my brain feels funny. Randomly, my hands feel colder than normal, and I notice sensations more like sounds, colors, touch, etc. This has got to be a placebo effect, right? Doesn't it take a while to feel the effects? It depends. Generally, with anti-anxiety medications, they act immediately, versus antidepressants, which tend to take a little while to build up in your system. So it's going to depend on the medication, all of that. If you're experiencing, uh, I don't know, it's a little strange. Your hands feeling colder than normal, and your brain feeling funny, that kind of stuff. You might want to call. Actually, I would encourage you to call your doctor's office, and at a minimum, leave a message on the nurse line, and let them know that you're experiencing these side effects, and um, yeah, that you thought you should just call and report the side effects to them to see if it's an issue. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Tanya is here. It says, first time I stopped to listen. Well, welcome. We're glad you're here. That's a really valid point, Michelle. She says, also in that power over mindset is, if I'm winning, then they must be losing. Yes. The only exception to that is there are times where, if you're dealing, this is where the madness happens. Okay, if you're dealing with somebody who has that domination driven mindset, and they've done nothing but show you that they can't be trusted, and that everything is very manipulative, they use things against you, that they just want to argue, that they don't have sincere intentions, that they're not really sincerely solutions oriented, there does come a time and a place where you have to have that win-lose attitude. So we have to stop being solutions oriented and team oriented with a person who's shown us time and again that they are not. So we don't need to stand around and try to make them okay with our boundaries. or our deal breakers. We just need to implement them. And this isn't being mean. This isn't being uh, holding a grudge. This isn't anything other. This is what healthy boundaries look like in motion. So when a person is shown time and again, they're actively working against you, they can't be trusted, they're dangerous, they're destructive, they're deadly, whatever it might be, it's important that we're able to switch to stop trying to be team oriented and working towards a solution and be self-protective and be done with them. And of course, and be prepared for them to say, "Oh, this is so mean. This is so cruel. This is so unusual. How can you do this? You're the one. I can't believe you'd give up on us so easily. I want peace. I want to make this work. And now you're going to walk away and use all kinds of guilt and more manipulation." And this is why it's so important that we have solid footing in an understanding of our boundaries and standards and deal breakers, and realize, yeah, what they're saying, it's wildly inappropriate, right? Especially given the circumstances, and that I don't need to absorb it. I don't need to address it. I don't need to entertain it. I don't need to respond to it. I just need to shut this stuff down and drive on, because a lot of people like that, that's how they pull you back in. And so, yeah, standing firm and just saying, like, well, yeah, I hope you have changed. I hope you have, I hope all of these things, well, whatever. I don't care. Like, I'm done. This is my boundary and I'm done. And these are the consequences and I'm done. And you can think I'm mean and cruel and totally unreasonable. And I don't care because I'm done. And now I'm driving on. So bye bye. Okay, let me scroll. Michelle says, "Oh, Dana, those examples are nearly word for word what I heard. It was hard to weather, but I did." And Angela says laughingly, "Oh my gosh, did you talk to my ex?" Yeah, it's, it's the same kind of stuff time and again. There's only a certain range. That's the thing with manipulative behavior. At first, when we don't see it for what it is, there's so much confusion that surrounds us. Of, I don't really know what happened. I can't quite pinpoint it. All I know is I'm confused. And is it me? Is it them? Is it what, like what's going on? Once that veil, once that fog lifts, once that veil of confusion lifts and you see it for what it is, you don't get pulled into it. Or if you do get pulled into it, you don't stay in it for very long. And it's not nearly as confusing as it was before. And it's sort of like, oh, okay. Yeah, you're going to throw a fit and, uh, try to make me feel bad and say all these things and, whatever. Like, yeah, whatever. Uh, yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Michelle. Because I I didn't think of that. She says, talking to Alex, there are podcasts of this live chat and the book club. They're a great resource to pop in your ear and listen to, even when you can't watch. Yes. And the podcast is also called Thrive After Abuse. You can find me all across the interwebs under that. So, yes, hopefully that will help. Michelle says, I was caught up in trying to make it make sense. The confusion kept me from seeing it was abusive. It was a fog. Yeah. And also a big part of it is we all have this idea of what abuse is. Just like we all have this idea of um, what a tsunami is. This is an example I use in my book. It's called the Narcissists Playbook, and it's all about manipulation tactics and how to disarm them. And because we all have this idea of what we think something is, if we don't experience it in that exact same way, then we're confused. So, with a tsunami, for example, people think, oh, yeah, it's a giant tidal wave, right? It's a giant wave coming straight at us. Well, no, not at first. At first, it's all the water leaving the shore, and it's very quiet. and there are no waves in sight. And with abuse, there's this idea of, oh yeah, I know what an abusive relationship is. It's when one person's really, hateful and hurtful and mean and cruel, and they yell and they scream and they hit, or they're just very violent. And if what we experience, and oh, then they're also a guy, right? So if we experiencing, and there, it's in a marriage or a relationship. But if we experience anything outside of that, it can be very confusing. And even when you're in that exact kind of stereotypical abusive relationship, it's still confusing because odds are that person hasn't been um, 100% abusive 100% of the time. There's probably been some good times that you've had with them. Um, you know, there's been parts of them that are likable. And so then that can be confusing too. Right. Monica says, yeah, I never thought that people really could be emotionally abused. I thought abuse was slapping, punching, and hitting. That's another great point to bring up. People tend to think, oh, emotional abuse, like, oh, give me a break. Other people have it so much worse, right? Uh, oh, come on, name calling, that's not that big of a deal. I mean, people are getting killed out there. People are getting their, arms broken or broken noses. And you think just because somebody calls you some names that you've got it bad, like, oh, you're just the delicate snowflake, right? And that's not true. And we know that scientifically, that's not true, that verbal and emotional abuse causes physical harm in a person. And as anybody that's ever experienced it, um, the impact and is long lasting, and the effects can be disastrous. So, uh, let's see. Yeah, Rick says, yeah, a lover will abuse you differently than a brother, and differently again than a mother. Yep, exactly. Um, There was a comment here. Where did it go? Casey. Okay, Casey's comment says, why do narcissists have a hard time admitting when they're wrong? Well, okay, so at the core of let me back up. Okay. Narcissism is a trait, okay? And it exists on a continuum ranging from healthy to problematic. It's kind of that ability it's the ability to put ourselves first, to be a priority, to kind of be a priority in our own life. On the healthy scale, or a healthy side of the scale, it's what's needed to set and achieve goals, to get out of bed in the morning, to feel like we have value, to set boundaries, all of that. We need like a functional, healthy degree of um, um, self value. Okay. When we start moving down the scale to a more problematic degree of narcissism, we're not operating from a place of, oh, I matter or I value myself. We're operating from a place of anger and fear. And so, kind of the primary defense behind that pathological degree of narcissism, whether it's ongoing or just in that moment, it's defensiveness. And kind of like we talked about earlier, when a person is angry, defensive, okay? When defensiveness is present, connection to another person is not. So their brain has literally gone into fight or flight mode. And that's, I mean, there's a lot of problems with problematic degrees of narcissism, but that's one of them. So that level of defensiveness creates this, it's a me against you kind of attitude. It shuts down all effective communication because everything is being filtered through this lens of defensiveness. And this is where it gets very strange because they perceive, pretty much because their ego is so paper thin that everything is perceived as some sort of attack on them. And uh, yeah, so that is part of it. And because their ego is so paper thin, they cannot, they cannot, or have a very, very difficult time admitting when they're wrong. And also, in part, here's the thing too, we all have reasons for what we do, right? And so it can feel, our behavior feels, if, barring like significant cognitive issues, it, when we take action, it feels, we have reasons for it. And so therefore it feels reasonable. And because it feels reasonable, we tend to not feel bad about it. It's like, well, yeah, this is why I did X, Y, and Z. With narcissists, it's the same thing. They feel entitled, but the problem is their mindset, the way that they perceive the world, is deeply pathological. Let me give you an example. I don't know if you remember, there was um, there's a group out there of men called incels. It stands for involuntarily celibate. And there was a guy, this was a handful of years ago. His name was Elliot Rogers, and he had very much bought into this incel mentality. And so, kind of their collective mentality is that, um, that basically, because of some sort of unchangeable thing about them, their height, their physical appearance, generally those two things, that they'll never be able to be in a relationship, and that, so they're kind of destined to go through life alone. They have a lot of hostility and rage towards women. And if you've ever come across incel stuff online, it's really dark and really disturbing. There's very much that entitlement mentality there of, oh, well, women shun me, all they want, they just want to use me. They're going to use me for money. They're going to, um, they owe me. And this is kind of where that whole kind of quote unquote nice guy uh, trope, I guess you could say, online comes from. It's this mentality of, well, if I hold the door open for you, or if I do something nice for you, then you owe me. And if you don't date me or have sex with me or whatever, then you bitch. You've led me on, and I am completely entitled to lash out at you. So that kind of mentality. So in their mind, they're completely entitled to treat women in violent, dangerous, deadly, horrifically misogynistic ways, because to them it's, oh, well, this woman didn't appreciate me and the world's kicked me down, and I'm entitled to lash out because I'll never be able to be in a relationship, kind of thing. And without fully understanding, no, actually, it's your personality. Like, you have a shit personality. Like, that's what it is. Your mindset is what is keeping you single. And if you've ever, and then also if you've ever come across men that have left that incel mindset, left those groups, and then have gone on to do the work um, to cultivate more of that team-oriented mentality, to get rid of that misogyny, all of that. Most of them have been able to then, accept, uh, kind of work through the insecurities and um, the shame and low self-esteem that they've internalized for so long, and go on to be in relationships. That was a very long answer, and I hope that made sense. So, okay, let me scroll up here. Casey's saying, oh, this is so helpful. Oh, good. I'm glad. I am glad. I should back up a little bit. Say, that was my own anger coming out there. With incels, okay, that personality, all of that anger, all of that hostility, all of that entitlement, yes, it absolutely gets me seeing red, to the point I just want to spit nails. It makes me so just sick to my stomach. But um, I guess what I'm trying to say here is all of that's coming from kind of these deep, this very fragile ego, and these a lot of this ego wounding that's occurred over time. And it really is tragic. It really, really is. Um, yeah. So the point besides that is when people feel entitled to act the way that they do, and if they don't have a solid understanding of kind of a fuller context of kind of right and wrong, or of yeah, I guess right or wrong kind of overall behavior, then that's where things can get very problematic, because we all can justify our behavior, but it doesn't make it right. So yeah. uh let's see. Irene asks, do narcissists blame everyone and everything else for their inability to thrive and be better? Yes. Yeah. That's kind of by definition. So if you think of a narcissist as it's such a fragile ego, to the point of they really cannot handle criticism or constructive criticism, or people disagreeing with them. The only way, and there's no room for anybody else. That's the thing. It's a very, very stunted and immature mindset. It's like that of a very small child. And in the book, actually, The Verbally Abusive Relationship, Patricia Evans summed it up, I thought, really well. She described kind of this the abusive mentality. She didn't. I don't think she came right out and talked about narcissists or narcissistic people, but that's exactly what it is. It's this mindset of other people are an extension of me. And we all have this mindset at certain stages of development, but we grow out of it. If things go, you know, according to plan, we grow out of that. And, um, but she gives the example of a child who has a teddy bear. So when a child has a teddy bear, or some sort of, imaginary friend or something like that, that person, that teddy bear, that imaginary friend is an extension of them. It has all of the same thoughts and wants and needs and opinions and everything. And everything goes fine. If that teddy bear, which it never would, right? Because it's an extension of the child. But if that teddy bear were to start disagreeing with them, or to start having thoughts or feelings of their own, the child would be horrified and very confused, because it's sort of like, well, what do you mean? You know? Um, it's the same with narcissists. It's very much this mentality of, you're an extension of me, and there's a complete inability to understand the uniqueness and separateness of other people, because they think that their way is the only way, that they are right, everybody else is wrong. So it's this mentality of, yes, um, sure, we all have wants and needs and thoughts and feelings and opinions, and but my love for you is it's conditional. It's only based on you thinking and feeling and acting and behaving the exact same way as me. And if you step out of those lines, then we're done. It's a very rigid approach to relation. You can't, there is no sincere relationship with the narcissist. Um, it involves, to be in a relationship with somebody like that, it is going to involve basically erasing major parts of yourself. And that's what a lot of survivors do. And they don't realize it until these relationships end. And then it's sort of like, oh my gosh, I don't know who I am. And of course, if you were to ask them, they would say, oh, well, I was just kind of trying to keep the peace, or I thought this is what compromise meant, or I thought this was what it looked like to, all relationships take work. And that's what I was doing, and not realizing, oh, I stopped talking about politics. I stopped watching my favorite TV show. I stopped wearing a certain color. I stopped listening to certain type of music, or I changed my major in college. I did all of this to try to appease the other person. This is very common with a narcissistic parent whose love is conditional. Sure. Helpful Mom saying Marla had a question about the differences between a narcissist and a sociopath. She says, I feel like looking back, my ex may have been a sociopath. Yeah. Probably the best way that I can put it is um, all sociopaths, well, it's now referred to as antisocial personality disorder, but we'll just, because that's a mouthful, we'll just say sociopaths. Okay. All sociopaths are at the core narcissists, but not all narcissists are sociopaths. So, some of the main differences between the two. So, narcissists, it's this um, insufferable degree of self absorption, of selfishness, of um, hurtful behavior, kind of a cold, cruel, calloused indifference to the wants, needs, thoughts, feelings, opinions of other people. It's just all about them all of the time. And there's different ways that narcissism can manifest. Sometimes it comes across as, oh, wow, this is that it's kind of the quote unquote like that guy or, that girl at the bar, for example, the kind of the know it all. And, um, or a person who just, if you've ever worked, I mean, most people here, I think, have had a relationship with a narcissist, but it's somebody they cannot take criticism. They do not work as a team. It's just exhausting, just absolutely exhausting. It kind of feels like everything is a battle. There's a lot of walking on eggshells. There's a lot of triangulation. It's just a bunch of nonsense, and it's just jaw dropping. It's jaw dropping ridiculousness, like at every turn. Um, with sociopaths or with sociopathic behavior, the overlap is there's still that level of uh, kind of selfish disregard for others that narcissists have. Their ego may or may not be as paper thin. So, um, uh, sociopaths, uh, they tend to have a kind of a long-standing pattern of lack of regard for rules, for social norms, for the rights of other people. There tends to be cruelty, kind of documented cruelty towards animals, towards other people, but not always. Not always. I really, um, yeah, there's a couple of like the DSM criteria that I'm not a fan of when it comes to antisocial personality disorder because how would you find that? Like, it's I don't know. Um, and plus there's a lot of people out there uh, that don't come across like that. They don't come across like with conduct disorders or that they have an axe to grind with society or that they're um, very impulsive and angry and they're kind of a live wire. Frankly, the sociopaths that I've worked with and the two that I've dated weren't like that at all. So like I said, I'm not a big fan of that DSM criteria, but um, and also I think that the bigger difference between narcissists and sociopaths is sociopaths tend to be very manipulative and very exploitative. Whereas narcissists, a person can be a narcissist and just have a uh, kind of just this selfish self-absorption, right? Um, and not all, and again, like anything else, it's on a continuum. So um, you probably there's a lot of uh, probably geniuses out there that would meet the criteria for um, narcissistic personality disorder. And that's the thing is because people are all different, even though they might have the same diagnosis, there could still be a lot of variety, and there will be a lot of variety between them because they're still people at the end of the day. So some narcissists yell and scream, some belittle, some um, you know, you name it. But with sociopaths tend to be more of like the grifters of the world, the con artists or the emotional con artists. They um, they have more emotional self-awareness to know that they need to kind of come across as more of a social chameleon. And again, not that that's a bad thing. I think people that have like a healthy degree of emotional awareness are able to kind of blend into a variety of situations, but sociopaths blend in and then exploit or extort. That's the difference. So, um, let me scroll up. I hope that answers your question. If you're a fan of the show Star Trek, okay, this is way back when. If you've never seen the whole series of The Next Generation on Star Trek, I highly advise that you do. It's fantastic TV viewing. Um, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful show. Anyways, there was a character on Star Trek who I think perfectly sums up uh, kind of a narcissist, and it's the character of Q. And I forget the actor's name who played him, but uh, he was just kind of this omnipotent, arrogant. He played a god in the show, but it was that mentality of just arrogant, petty, vindictive, reactive, um, kind of putting people in no-win situations, um, high conflict personality, all of that. But that was just a great example of narcissist. Um, yeah. So let's see. Let me. Lady G says, can you speak about passive or more covert sociopathic behavior? My soon to be ex is so passive in all of his very destructive behavior. There's that runs a huge range, right? So it tends to be behavior that's more hidden, and it tends to be hidden with a lot of charm, a lot of saying the right things and then getting better at hiding it. Um, you know, it can wear a person out, and it will wear a person out to try to anticipate all of the different ways that a manipulator is going to manipulate. And thankfully, you don't need to. All you really need to focus on is holding your boundaries and realizing you can't trust this person at all. If they're, you would be wise to just assume if they're talking, they're lying. If they're communicating, if they're using sign language, they're lying. If they're emailing, they're lying. If they're texting, they're lying. You just have to err on the side of this person has shown me that they have absolutely no moral fiber. There's no character there whatsoever. The default is going to have to be I'm just going to assume that they're a pathological liar and that nothing that they say can be taken at face value. That'll save you a lot of sanity from trying to parse out, well, what part of this, what part of this is true and what part of this is false and what could they be up to? Don't do that. It'll make you nuts. So realize, okay, this person lies all the time. And because of that, I need to set myself up to win in these situations as much as possible. I need to focus on what do I have control over and what do I not have control over. So with situations in terms of destructive behavior, like what like you don't yeah, I'm just gonna throw out example. Let's say your ex is, oh, I really want to make things work. I love you. I want to be with you, blah, blah, blah. And you're trying to figure it out. If you know this person has a history of lying, you'd be wise to protect yourself from destructive behavior. So, for example, what you could do is if you share accounts, stop sharing accounts. Don't tell them ahead of time, hey, I'm going to separate accounts. You're going to need to get your own phone. Don't tell them ahead of time, hey, I'm going to separate bank accounts. Don't assume that a person who has shown you that they have manipulative, destructive behavior, do not assume that they're going to somehow magically change and become, to have the same morals or motivations as you. When you stop allowing yourself to be manipulated and abused and stolen from, that's when they lose. That's when they flip out, because it's this mentality of, well, how dare you? And then they start kind of going back through history and thinking, well, God, I bought her a Christmas gift this one year, so therefore she owes me. And well, I picked her up from work this one time, therefore she owes me. They start keeping score. And that's how they're using that scorekeeping to do the mental gymnastics necessary to keep up whatever bad behavior they have. So protecting yourself is going to involve getting clear about what, kind of thinking of a game plan of what are the different ways that this person can kind of screw you over. Do you share a bank account? If so here's an example of something that you could potentially do is transfer out the money that is yours into another account, and then let them know that you've done this instead of waiting for them to get their own account. Do you see what I'm saying? Or with cell phones, instead of waiting for them to get their own cell phone, or if you feel like, well, I don't want to screw them over and cancel their cell phone, then you go get a cell phone on a different plan. And then you let them know that you're canceling your cell phone on this existing plan and that this plan is now theirs. If they don't want it, which is probably what they're going to say, well, I don't want it, I'm going to get my own phone. Fine. Then you or they can cancel it. But you don't want to put yourself or keep yourself in a situation that they have unnecessary power or leverage over you. If you're going to, let's say, have a conversation about something, um, you don't want to have them over to your house, right? Because then you have to get them to leave. You don't have control over that, or at least it's very difficult. It's much easier to you go to a public place where there's other people around. It's a little different with COVID now, but even a parking lot of a grocery store would be a good place uh, to do a drop off in a public place. They don't need to be coming to your house. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where you've got to try to get them to leave or get them to somehow respect your boundaries. Flip the script. So you're in a situation, hey, I'll meet you there. That way you have ability to leave. Yeah, that kind of stuff. So changing all the passwords on everything. uh, Trying to think of what else. And it might seem paranoid. It might seem kind of going to extreme limits, but the reality is you just don't know. Um, that's the thing with people that have lying problems is you don't know to what extent, especially if it's destructive and it's caused harm in your life in the past. I would also encourage you to have any communication with them about anything that uh, could somehow backfire or cause problems. Have it in writing, email them, text them. You want receipts, you want screenshots, you want proof. Treat every interaction with them from this point forward as if is asking yourself, is this a Judge Judy episode waiting to happen? And if I were to go in front of Judge Judy, what kind of evidence would she need to see? And then reverse engineer it. Where people get themselves in trouble, and I get it, I absolutely get it, is they they're overwhelmed and they're afraid and they want to fall back into denial. They want that because it can be very overwhelming to be like, oh my gosh, I do not know if I have the time, the energy, or the money to go toe to toe with this person. And we want to kind of curl up into this fantasy that everything's going to be okay. And that we don't, and so as a result, we just don't want to rock the boat. Well, I just kind of want to give in to them because, man, I just I don't want to fight. I don't want to make things worse. So I'll just give in this time. And, and then it doesn't, then just, that might work for a little bit, but then boom, it doesn't. So having your boundary and then holding it. let's see. I speak my truth. Thank you for the live stream donation. She has a question. Let me scroll up here. While I'm looking for it, I'm going to just says Michelle says, yeah, Trekkie here. The history of the universe, I think it was, made me see what that they showed in Star Trek was possible. It made diversity feel healthy and normal before it was a reality. Yeah. That whole show, the Next Generation show, was my safe place for the longest time. I just absolutely, and I was a kid when it came out. It didn't dawn on me about like diversity or anything else. It just, I loved how just well adjusted like everybody was on the show, and just their dynamic I thought was really cool. Um, okay, I speak my truth. I'm going up here. Looking for your question. Um, okay. While I'm looking for it, I'm just gonna pick out things. UNA says, I don't think Q was a Borg. No, he wasn't. The Borg were like the assimilated computer people. Q was just this omnipotent being. I think like a god of sorts. Whoever was the actor, I don't remember his name. He was fantastic. That whole show was so well cast. They did such a nice job with it. Um, okay. I speak my truth. Okay, I think I found your question. Let me just make sure that there's not multiple parts here. Okay. She says, I need help. I feel like I've lost my identity completely and my soul. I no longer have the willpower to detach from my narcissistic mother because I don't feel safe without her or with her. The abuse has gotten so bad. I'm in constant fear of having breakdowns because I'm afraid to leave because I don't want to leave her when I know this isn't safe. Could I be trauma bonded? My boundaries aren't honored, so I can't see her. Oh, boundaries aren't honored, so I can't see her at all. The gaslighting and love bombing all at once is what she does. She has followed me around the house, taking pictures of me when I told her I was going no contact, and she gaslighted and love bombed me in the same time in that second. Okay. I guess my first question for you is how old are you? Are you over the age of 18? And do you have a job? And the reason I ask is I'm trying to figure out how kind of what is your reality right now in terms of how realistic is it for you to kind of break out of this and to be on your own. Okay, and while she's answering, Huffle Mom says the actor who played Q, his name is John Delancey. Awesome. Thank you for finding that. Uh, and she says, I'm in therapy. Yes, I don't know how to help myself. Um, okay, are you over the age of 18? So, okay, and she says, I don't believe my reality. Okay, so that is very common. Whenever we're around somebody that has a very distorted view of reality, um, it's confusing. And especially if you grew up with it. It's 100 times more confusing. So that's very common. I think I frankly, I've yet to meet somebody who's grown up with a very narcissistic parent who's been able to have like a healthy degree of confidence in themselves and to really truly trust their reality. It's very common for them to look outside of themselves, to look for others, um, for validation, and to say, hey, it can be fear of making a mistake, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of letting other people down. Um, and of course, along with that, when you've been wrong your whole life, according to this person with a very uh, kind of problematic mindset, if if you've been wrong, odds are you've been wrong in all of the ways that you're different from them. So the result for that is for a child, there's very key parts of themselves that what make you an individual weren't validated. It's like if you were to not water a plant for so long, like it's going there, it's going to grow differently than it would had it been given good soil, sunlight, water. Um, the kind of the right elements to thrive. So separating from that, um, I'm glad you're in therapy first and foremost. That's incredibly helpful. The I, I really feel like what people tend to benefit from in order to get more of a grip on reality is to be able to compare and contrast uh, kind of healthy versus unhealthy in terms of healthy versus unhealthy relationships, healthy versus unhealthy mindset or thinking, healthy versus unhealthy ways of handling certain things. So being able to compare and contrast is going to at least kind of start you on that path um, of seeing kind of what messages you picked up from your childhood home that are very disempowering and very dysfunctional. So kind of moving in that direction is a really good step. And then um, also kind of, and this is, I mean, and it's a process too, but is for in terms of like making mistakes and these kinds of things, realizing that uh, making mistakes, it's part of being human. We all make them. And it's that mistakes aren't the problem that we might think they are. We go through, if we have very difficult, demanding, kind of perfectionistic or narcissistic or both parents, mistakes are bad, differences are bad. And so a child walks on a lot of eggshells trying to not make mistakes. In school, mistakes are punished, right? And the reality is that that's how we learn. We learn through trial and error. And so kind of changing your mindset about making mistakes, like, because the reality is, yeah, as you move forward in life, if you're stepping outside of your comfort zone, even remotely, you're going to make mistakes. And that's okay. So kind of learning how to give yourself that compassion and grace for when that happens, realizing, hey, you don't need to do everything perfectly. It's impossible to. No one starts out at the finish line. So, cultivating a different relationship with um, trial and error, I guess, can also help. And practicing, okay, well, when you make a decision or you do take an action and it doesn't work out as planned, then kind of playing that through. Then instead of kind of crumpling into shame or fear or what have you, then thinking of, okay, that didn't work. Then now what? Now what? The most successful, well-adjusted people out there are the ones that try and fail all the time. They're constantly learning, they're constantly growing, but the difference is they're not internalizing. They're not internalizing those failures as failures. They're seeing it as, okay, this is just part of the growth process. It doesn't I don't have to make this about that I'm somehow, incompetent or incapable or a bad person, or um, it doesn't have to be to lead to this shame spiral. It's just, um, I tried something, it didn't work. Let me take some time to examine it and then try again. And what you're describing too about making a mistake and then thinking something bad might happen, uh, this that part of it uh, almost sounds to me like there's some obsessive compulsive stuff going on there. So it's not uncommon for when if a person grows up in a very anxiety inducing environment, which is what you have grown up with based on what you've said, your mom's behavior, that kind of stuff is very, very stressful. It's not uncommon for a person to then develop a host of kind of anxiety related um, um, anxiety related issues. So that would definitely be something to talk to your therapist about. It tends to be a way in terms of being afraid of making a mistake or thinking that or mistakenly thinking that we have more power than we really do. Thinking of, oh, well, if I make a mistake, then something bad's going to happen, right? Like maybe this means that, my mom's going to, I don't know, my friend is going to get in a car accident or the house will burn down or something. So I have to then take these actions in order to prevent that. That kind of thinking, it's a lot of, well, it's irrational thinking, right? But it's also very anxiety fueled. And um, but it's coming from a place of wanting that safety and that security and that predictability of, okay, I can affect change in my environment. If I do, if I flip the lights on and off 10 times, then I can somehow have predictability. I can ensure the my safety, right? Or I can somehow control outcomes. So that kind of stuff would be really good to unpack with your therapist. There's my website's, like I said, we're in the middle of updating it. Hopefully, it'll be live here in the next few days. I'll put up a worksheet on core beliefs that can be very helpful. And I'll also put up some information on there about kind of the differences between like functional and dysfunctional relationships. Because again, I really think if people can kind of compare and contrast the two, there's a lot of clarity that comes from it. I speak my truth says, I just fear I'll die and become like her. I've lost my worth and self esteem. I've lost so much of myself already. It says, my gut is that I just need to leave her. I would agree. It does sound like you need to leave her. It sounds like there's a very, that this is just a very, very deeply dysfunctional and draining environment for you. And again, that might be something to kind of explore with your therapist in terms of, okay, well, what would that look like if you were to leave her and to move out onto your own and kind of get kind of bringing that want down into reality, coming up with like a budget or and probably more so a plan for if and when uncomfortable feelings come up, if she's using guilt or if you start feeling guilty or anxious or any uncomfortable feelings, then what? How will you handle those when they surface? In terms of you've already lost your worth and self-esteem, eh, yes, the upside, I don't know if I'd even say the upside to this. I guess you're not alone in that, is what I want to say. You're not alone in that. And everybody that's been through an abusive relationship, especially with a parent, struggles with exactly that. The good news is that there is life on the other side of this, and that healing from abuse, in large part, it's not about, um, it, it it's a well, it can feel like an awful lot of work, but the work that's involved, it's more about unbecoming. It's about unbecoming all of these things that you felt you needed to become in order to protect yourself, or that you should become, or that your mom wanted you to become, all of that. It's breaking away all of that, kind of these disempowering messages and ways of coping and ways of thinking and behaving. The good news is, and I really fully believe this with every ounce of my being, that that core, that solid sense of who you are, that what makes you you, I fully believe. And I have worked with tens of thousands of people in the support group and over the years, and I've never seen anything to the contrary of this. Okay, that core of who you are remains, and it remains unbroken, which is amazing. Amazing. So even though on the outside it can feel like, oh my gosh, I don't, I don't have a sense of identity, I have no self-esteem, I have no worth, I don't trust my judgment or my perception of reality, I just feel like a sheet in the wind. The good news is that when you get to a place, and thankfully you are in therapy, but getting to a place of safety and security, and ideally into an environment that's safe and secure, then that next step, it's processing all of that and getting examining all of the stuff that's not working for you, and that's contributing to all of these feelings of scatteredness and um, uncertainty and anxiety. So redheaded, that's cute. Redheaded Riding Hood says, Dana, do you have online courses? Because there are some to help you get your self-worth back. I'm taking one right now. I'm hoping to put some out there here in the near future. Yes, I have lots of plans for my site this year, and that is definitely one of them. Yeah. I Yeah, there's lots of plans. There's lots of plans. Hopefully, in the next couple months, there's going to be some pretty massive changes, and I'm very, very excited about it. So, yeah, we'll see if things roll out as on schedule as they're supposed to. Mm. JJ says, being adopted, then abandoned very, very young, I'm not sure I ever developed a core except a kind of hippie fantasy. And I feel that may be why it was so easy for me to be manipulated. I just had no identity. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you're so welcome. I Speak My Truth says, oh, thank you, Dana, with a little happy face, butterfly, like little prayer hands, cry face. Oh, yes. Sending you light and love, my dear. Yes. You hold on to that. I guess try to take comfort in that core of who you are, it's still there. And that's, from my own personal experience, going through many, many long, difficult, terrifying nights, wondering kind of what will become of me, knowing, I guess when I came to that realization of, oh my gosh, this core part is just always there. And it's not about becoming something different than we are. It's about unbecoming everything that we're not. There's a lot of peace in that. And I hope that your therapist is able to validate you and that you're able to reconnect with that inner part of who you are. So, okay, oh, yeah, I thought of that just as you wrote your question again. She says, Dana, do you think I could be trauma bonded? In part, absolutely. So, those trauma bonds, for people that are new here, it's the bonds. Well, okay, I'll answer. It's the bonds that are formed throughout the highs and lows of a relationship. It's the um, dysfunctional relationships tend to have a series of highs and lows. The bad times are really bad, but the good times are really good. And these bonds are formed, it's through the relief of the good times. So a parent, a person, whoever it might be very intimidating, use a lot of fear. It can be this very anxiety inducing situation. And then all of a sudden they do a 180 and everything's they're calm and friendly and likable, and things are just even keel again. And it's that relief of, oh, thank goodness. And that it's a chemical roller coaster as well, not just emotional, but it's also chemical. And so it creates kind of this push pull, but it forges these bonds that to a level that wouldn't be there normally. Another example of probably another example of this would be it's the different it's the difference in bonds between being in a book club with somebody and going through boot camp with them. Some sort of high anxiety, high stress situation. People that have gone through boot camp together or nursing school or medical school or um, you know, uh, a hurricane, these types of events that are very, very bonding for people. It the Whereas the connection that we make with people without those highs and lows, without all that fear and anxiety and all of that, it's even keel. Those bonds aren't as strong. So you could be in a book club with somebody for 20 years and bonds are not going to be as strong with them as it would be with if you went through some sort of major event, uh, major traumatic event with them, where it really kind of gets confusing and creates a lot of difficulty is when the highs and lows are with that person's behavior. So when they're doing this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing, that's what this abusive relationship, it's not this kind of third event, right? This neutral outside event like a boot camp or a hurricane or something like that. It's with this person's behavior. And especially with a parent-child bond, if there's an abusive parent, this is what can be so heartbreaking for so many professionals is um, the it's absolutely heartbreaking to see the lengths that a child will go to defend and protect their parent and to try to make that relationship work. And it oftentimes takes decades before they um, are able to break away. So it's kind of the saying like hope dies last. And there's this and then of course with an abusive parent, you're also dealing with a lot of very it's not just the abuse that's the problem, it's the mindset that drives the abuse. That's the problem. It's and that mindset is all kinds of skewed in all different kinds of ways. You have oftentimes a lot of parentification going on where the parent is acting like the child and then the child is having to act like the parent. So the child is feeling responsible for meeting the needs of the parent, maybe making them dinner, putting them to bed, waking them up in the morning, walking on eggshells, trying to not upset them, kind of keeping secrets, paying bills, doing things that are not age appropriate for that child, um, or appropriate anyways for that dynamic. Um, there's often effective communication, emotional availability. These skills are definitely not role modeled. It tends to be the exact opposite that's role modeled. Uh, Instead of having kind of unconditional positive regard for their child and validation and acceptance, it's the exact opposite. It's conditional love and conditional positive regard, and there's a lot of judgment and shame and guilt and fear that's used instead. Um, Instead of individuality being acknowledged and appreciated, it's shunned and shamed. Uh, so this is why I was saying it can help to kind of have this listed out in terms of functional and dysfunctional to compare and contrast. So hopefully I'll have that up on my website, thriveafterabuse.com, here within the next week. Um, yeah. And I speak my truth says I feel responsible for her as if I need to switch roles when my inner child just needs so much healing. Right. And that's part of the problem. Right. So um, you're playing multiple roles there and you're trying to protect yourself at the same time. So you have all of these unhealed emotional wounds, and she's got a ton of stuff going on. You're the daughter, she's the parent. You're feeling, and then there's this whole level of enmeshment, right? You're feeling responsible for her. It doesn't really sound like there's that's a two-way street. Um, she feels entitled for you to feel responsible for her. There's that expectation that you're responsible for her, and it's just it's all kinds of tangled up, and getting um, learning about boundaries and getting that separated out, and the differences between enmeshed boundaries and um, um, uh, functional boundaries and rigid boundaries, kind of what this looks like can really be helpful. And just realizing, as a human being, especially as an adult, um, you know well, even as a child, but as a human being, you have the right to have boundaries. It's just part of it. It's an important part, especially, well, it's an important part of being a human being. We all have, it's part of not only being a human being, but being an individual. It's that acknowledgement of we're all individuals here. And part of that, it's being able to see other people as individuals and understanding that uh, kind of where one person begins and ends and where the other person begins and ends. And relationships of any kind um, do not work for long when things are so intertwined that there is no beginning and ending of one person. It's just kind of this, morphed, squeezed, braided. Like these relationships are braided together. They're so deeply interwoven that there's no um, that it leads to unrealistic expectations. It leads to all kinds of just, yeah, unrealistic and inappropriate expectations of other people. Accountability is blurred. All kinds of things are blurred. Let's see. I speak my truth says my mom isn't mentally ill. She puts on high heels and nice outfits and she just pretends. She plays the game. Yeah. Yeah. Some people are, it's amazing how some people can play the game, who can completely pull it together and who do a decent job of pretending to be a functional, well-adjusted adult. And then you see kind of cracks in that and you're like, whoa, no, they are not. OMG. And children of kind of best case scenario, I guess you could go, like, emotionally immature parents see this a lot, and their reality of something's not right. There's my mom is an absolute nightmare. She's just horrific, and she does X, Y, and Z to me. That tends to go unvalidated and unaddressed, especially if the mom or the parent can pull it together and come across as a well-adjusted, functional adult. And that's incredibly difficult. And I'm just so sorry that you're going through that. So I hope, I hope hearing from other survivors, um, there's helps tremendously. And I hope that it does for you too, kind of getting that validation. Because here's another thing that I've noticed is um, we all tend to kind of think we have a pretty good grasp on the issue. And then talking to other survivors, it's so wild. It can just really blow that wide open and be like, oh my gosh, I never thought about it that way. Or, oh my gosh, um, yeah, you're right. Like that's a problem too. Or it brings so much clarity and understanding. to the situation. There are a lot of different support groups out there, and I would encourage you to join a handful of them. There's just be mindful of the ones that you do, kind of where you're joining them. If you're joining them on, let's say, for example, Facebook, you want to make sure that you have all your privacy settings. I actually, frankly, I would just create a fake account on Facebook and then join that way. That's the only real way to ensure your privacy. The reason I say this is because sometimes you people join groups like Mothers for Narcissistic Daughter or Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers, and then they're absolutely horrified to realize, oh, they thought they had their settings a certain way, but then people can tell they're in the group and blah blah blah. So yeah, but doing a search, looking around online for different groups it can be very helpful. Let's see. Yeah, Jennifer says hope dies last is probably a coping mechanism. Without hope, what does one have? Yes, yes and no. I think absolutely it's a coping mechanism, because if we don't have hope that something could be other than it is, then it can send us into like an emotional collapse. However, with that said, kind of I guess like the Buddhist in me, I feel like I don't know about that. Like I don't know if that defense mechanism is in place when we can't handle reality for what it is. And if we can't handle reality for what it is, it's generally because there's a significant amount of pain associated with it. The Buddhist in me tends to kind of think, well, then a more balanced perspective is found in detachment, in terms of realizing that um, kind of just things are what they are, and not needing them to be other than what they are. So yeah, I think there's a lot of pain when we resist reality. And while hope uh, can, especially misplaced hope, I think there's a difference. Hope for things being different when we're putting in the time and energy and the work involved to make things be different than they are. I think that's well-placed hope. Misplaced hope is when none of that's happening, and it's just the fantasy of, oh, this person's going to recover, or oh, this is um I, for example, I remember when my dad was sick. He passed away was 2019, so yeah, about a year and a few months now. He was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer out of the blue, and it happened it progressed very, very quickly. And we had a lot of people coming over from the church, from friends, and everybody wanted to resist the diagnosis. And it was so difficult to witness kind of just this false hope that everybody had. And kind of just wishing, like, instead of avoiding reality, can we just be here? Can we just be here in this moment? Human being to human being, like, we can't fix it, we can't change it. There's nothing that can be done. So can we just be here? Can we just be here fully present? You know? So I don't know. Easier said than done. Uh, Embers is talking to I Speak My Truth, kind of, I think about the trauma bonds and everything. And so the list that I recommend making every now and again, it's, yeah, I call it the for when you miss him or her list. And it's writing down all of the reasons in relationships is by writing down all of the awful things that they've done, or all of the reasons that this relationship is not working and why you need to get some distance. And then when you're feeling um, kind of the pull of nostalgia, or the pressure from other people, or certain holidays come up, or whatever it might be, where you're tempted to soften your boundaries, to then pick up that list and then read it, and it'll remind you of, okay, yeah, that's why I have these boundaries in place. It's for these reasons. Let's see. I Speak My Truth says, for now, texting her is a boundary, a couple times a year until I feel secure within to not need her. Baby steps. Still fighting the part of me that's wounded, that doesn't want to leave her. Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to start, you know? And here's the thing with boundaries, you'll know how they're working for you in large part based on how you feel. So if you're leaving an interaction with anyone, frankly, anyone, and you're feeling the feelings associated with that are on that level of discomfort. You're feeling irritated, frustrated, angry, um, anxious, fearful, uh, these kinds of things. Those are generally some really great, very clear signs that we need to re-examine the boundaries we have with them. Maybe it's spending less time with them. Maybe it's not entertaining or engaging in certain conversations. Maybe it's going to be doing something different, and we can tell when we've made enough changes. And again, in large part based on how we feel. When we start feeling kind of cool, calm, collected, it's a neutral feeling. It's like uh, warm room temperature bath water. Like, you don't notice it, you don't not notice it. It just it's just that level of um, comfort. So that's sometimes those kinds of high conflict relationships, well, at a minimum, that's the first goal, to get to that place of emotional neutrality. So in time, and again, this is a lot easier said than done, but in time, uh, when we're around people that are very activating like that, um, when we've kind of gotten to a certain place in our healing, and we have the skills of kind of being able to self-soothe and giving ourselves grace and compassion and not getting hooked back in. We can get to that place where, if we are feeling very activated and very upset, um, that we can distance ourselves and then do some kind of self-exploration about, okay, where are these feelings coming from? Because the kind of the benefit or the upside to those very intense emotional responses is that's kind of the next part of ourselves that's calling out to be healed. It's very unpleasant, but I think that's probably a really healthy, mm, kind of, I don't know, maybe more balanced way of seeing that kind of response. So again, it's not fun, and it's not something that we want to experience again and again. And it can be very difficult to slow things down in the moment, because when we're activated, we tend to go into fight or flight, and we're not thinking clearly because we're completely activated. But at a minimum, after the fact, then reflecting upon, like, wow, where did that come from? So whenever there's a really profound or an emotional response that that seems disproportionate to this situation, um, then odds are, because it's an emotion that's been long unheard and long unhealed. But yeah, kind of doing that work of, okay, well, where does this come from, and when did I first start feeling this way, and um, kind of w- like what actions can I take? Kind of what does this emotion, or what does this part of me, part of myself need? So yeah, it can be very interesting. Wish Cloud Studios asks, what do you do when you keep having dreams about your abuser? Um, well, okay. So I guess the way that I think about dreams is when we sleep, uh, that's our brain. If you're familiar like with computer stuff, our it's like our brain defragging the hard drive. It's chunking up data. It's kind of making it's cleaning things up. That's what our brain does when we sleep. And when there's a lot of information and very traumatic experiences, that things that are unresolved, there's a lot of communication that's been left unsaid. There's a lot of hurt that's still there. All of this, our brain is trying to process it, and I think our brain kind of hooks onto this because our brain's primary job is to keep us safe. And when we've been through an abusive relationship, we weren't safe emotionally, physically, financially, you name it. We weren't safe. And so when something catches our brain's attention of, danger, danger, it it desperately needs to make sense of that so it can figure out what to do different next time in order to keep us safe. With traumatic situations, this tends to bubble up and resurface as nightmares or even night terrors. And um, so something that might help with this is to try keeping a dream journal. So, because oftentimes, especially with dreams, it's not so much the the literal content of the dream. It's what that person or what that object or what that situation represents. So if you're having kind of this reoccurring dream about an ex who was abusive, then writing it down in as much detail as you can, and then kind of reflecting upon, okay, like what were the emotions that I experienced, or how was I left feeling when I woke up from this? Because odds are and if especially if there's a pattern there of, man, I keep having the same dream and I keep waking up sad, or I wake up crying, or I wake up just really angry, then those are some of the next emotions or the next parts of that relationship that are kind of crying out to be healed. So, um, I mean, therapy can be good for this. Working through them in a support group can be helpful. Um, yeah, giving voice to that, allowing yourself to feel how you feel. Like, it's okay. It's completely okay and appropriate and understandable to have a wide range of emotions after abuse, to sometimes miss them, to hate them, to love them, to be angry as hell, to be to feel guilt, to feel sadness, you name it. It can be a wild ride of emotions. And uh, yeah, and allowing yourself to feel that. So oftentimes when those emotions have been processed, then those dreams do tend to become less frequent or less emotional. I was just going to mention that Embers said, Dana, I realized that my nightmares of my abusive ex have gone away since I started weekly EMDR 6 months ago. Yeah, I would believe it. And that's, um, I, we still need to talk about that, Embers. We need to email about that. Um, EMDR, it's powerful, powerful stuff. And uh, yeah, that's not, you know what's weird? So here's what's weird too, is because there can be all kinds of things that surface when there's been a lot of emotions that have gone unexpressed for a long time. Um, and it can kind of go either way. So here's an example. I did a, uh, I was getting certified in this kind of, I don't know, like anger, um, kind of recovery type course that I was going through. And so part of it is we were having to do these exercises with each other. And so we had to kind of pick something that was upsetting, but not, not extremely so, because we're, professionals, and like it's not really time to fully process our stuff. Well, anyways, because it's a class, because we're trying to learn. And I picked a friendship that I had back in high school that I thought I was largely over. And I was bringing up some stuff, and I was getting so angry while I was bringing it up that I broke out into a cold sore while I was um, telling this situation to this other woman. I've never had a cold sore before, and I've never had one since. And it went away the next day. But it was developing as I was speaking. It was like this giant fever blister. And I could see myself on camera, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, why? What is this? And I think it was just all of that pent up anger and energy and emotion just surfacing. It was really wild. So I guess the point of that is sometimes it's amazing the connection between physical and emotional, and revisiting painful stuff and kind of getting it out of our system can result in a wide variety of things. Uh, but it can also, the once it's resolved, it's amazing the changes that can happen. We might crave different foods. We might um, sleep better at night. Um, yeah, yeah, it's just really wild. Shannon saying to Bonnie, she says, "Oh gosh, at least you can scream. My night terrors are with my mouth. My mouth won't open." Oh yeah, that's terrifying. Yeah, UNA saying external expression of internal turmoil. Yep. Oh, wonderful. Michelle says, yes, I've been suffering from physical symptoms as I work through this rough stuff. The body keeps the score. It's been helpful to reread. Yeah, it's really wild. The cool thing too with EMDR is w- part of it, it's because there's a lot going on all at one time. There's kind of holding on to, um, or like reconnecting with the worst part of a certain experience, and then um, kind of identifying a disempowering core belief that goes along with it, then figuring out or identifying a positive core belief to overwrite that with, and then you're doing these bilateral movements um, that help the brain move information from the right side of the brain to the left side of the brain. It helps process it, and then you're uh, so the part of you that's kind of thinking of the event, but then you're watching these movements in front of you. Um, it's like you're in the past, but you're also in the present. It's really wild. And so you're activating all of these different parts of your brain. The the cool part of it is with, especially with core beliefs, is when you're working to overwrite those. there can be kind of this domino effect. Or if you're familiar with the game Minesweeper, like sometimes you hit a box. This is a very old game. I don't even know if anybody knows what I'm talking about, but you hit a box and it kind of clears out an area. And that's what it does with these core beliefs. So changing one core belief, identifying it as limiting, and then replacing it with something different, and then getting to a place where you can accept that as and this can take a few sessions, but accepting that as absolute truth, as part of your identity, it there's the change isn't isolated to just that one event. Like there's multiple things that um, that change. It's just the coolest thing. Coolest thing. I was really on the fence about EMDR for a long time. I thought it was kind of sciency. Like I didn't really. Uh, yeah, I had my suspicions about it, but the more I get into it, and the more yeah, it's really powerful. Cool, very cool stuff. Rick says, "Oh, I used to dream that my ex was cheating on me, and dreams really do come true." Well, and the reality is that there might have been changes in her behavior during, the times that you were awake that you thought were odd, and that you were trying to minimize and gloss over and give her the benefit of the doubt, but your brain was like, something's weird here. And so, er, the information, our subconscious mind absorbs everything, and I forget the difference. It's exponential. Like it's crazy, the difference. So our subconscious mind, let's just say, picks up trillions of bits of data a second, whereas what actually makes its way to our conscious mind is like 1/100th of that. I mean, it's a very significantly smaller difference. But a lot of times um it's stuff that the challenge is we tend to perceive and filter information uh, not for what it is, but more so through our defense mechanisms, or through the emotional. We tend to filter things through the level of emotional health that we have at the time. And this is another reason kind of examining these core beliefs can be so powerful, is because a lot of these beliefs we pick up at a pretty early age. Well, the way that a child views the world or views things, situations in the world, and the way an adult views them are two very different things. And so we might be going through life, and oftentimes we are, with kind of this maladaptive or problematic belief about something that was either intentionally or unintentionally instilled in us as a child, and that belief's no longer serving us, but it's become second nature, that that we're not even really aware that it's a belief, or if we are aware of it, we're not aware of how much it's really driving our behavior. So it's, yeah, interesting stuff. Wish Cloud Studios asks, what is EMDR? EMDR, it stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and it's a oftentimes a short-term therapy, um, where uh, it, it's not talk therapy. It's very different from talk therapy. So um, you have to find a provider, like a therapist, who's certified in it, and it's God, there's just a lot to it. So it's kind of become like the main therapy for trauma, especially PTSD. And um, the challenge is, but it can be used really for anything that's uncomfortable. So anxiety, um, addiction, weight loss, pain, physical pain, um, any type of uncomfortable emotion or physical sensation it can help with. It's pretty cool. Depending on the practitioner, sometimes people, and I think when people have reported this in the chat, where that they have gone to get help, and then they've said, oh, EMDR's made them worse, or these kinds of situations. Uh, Generally, that's uh, if people are seeking out, like, let's say, for example, EMDR for something that's very, very traumatic, and um, a good EMDR practitioner is going to kind of make sure that the person that's the best choice. That's the best choice to start with EMDR. So sometimes a person might say, gosh, yeah, I don't know, I had this horrific event in my life. I'm going to seek out EMDR to work on this event. But if their coping skills need some work, if their support skills need some work, then maybe diving into the deep end like that isn't the best place to start. Maybe and it oftentimes isn't. Sometimes starting off with something that's um, going to cause less reactivity is a better place to start. So the person can get comfortable with the process, they can get comfortable with you, um, and kind of learn these other skills so that they can that they're just that they're set up for success. The point is, I think when people have had bad experiences with EMDR, it's they've wanted to do a deep dive. Their practitioner, for whatever reason, was like, "Okay, let's go for it," and then things got too deep too fast, and then they um, it was too much too soon. Uh, Let's see. Kayla says, I wonder if believing we cannot live without something almost guarantees we will create an experience to challenge that, a subconscious attempt to free ourselves. Believing we cannot live without something almost guarantees we'll create an experience to challenge that. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think at a minimum, if something is that significant to us, that it's at the forefront of our mind, and we're telling ourselves, I absolutely, like, this is so significant to me, right? Like, I cannot live without this. Then we're going to continue like that part of our brain, that reticular activating system, is going to continue scanning our environment for it subconsciously because it's important to us. And if we're um, thinking, oh, I cannot live without it, I cannot live without it, I cannot live without it, then there's a very solid chance that even if we don't necessarily create an experience to challenge that, would probably like even inadvertently have an experience where we are challenged with that of um because no situation's going to go our way 100% of the time. So then it's sort of realizing, oh, okay, well, yeah, actually, I this was significant to me. I didn't think I could live without it, but now that I've lived without it, here I am, and I'm still here. I don't know. I think a lot of it, and so she's saying, is it a subconscious attempt to free ourselves? I think that part of it has more to do the with us, with it's not so much the event itself, it's the perception of the event. And really, that's where the power is. Because events just sort of like in the book Man's Search for Meaning, like Eli Wiesel. Um, he talks about that, and that's what is so profound. It's, here's a man, a psychiatrist who went through the Holocaust and in all of the horrors of the Holocaust, lost pretty much his whole family, any and every atrocity that could happen to a human being he experienced. And that was his one realization of, you can lose everything, everything. But the one thing a person can't take away from you is the meaning that you assign events. And and so him kind of making that determination of, well, what meaning am I going to assign to certain things? How am I going to this event, has the power to shape me in ways that are unimaginable. But at the same time, I can also choose how I will be shaped by this. And so a lot of his time in the concentration camp, and I think a lot of what helped him emotionally survive the concentration, and probably physically too, survive, was that he um, decided to kind of make his time there about other people. So it was, he was using that experience um, to kind of to live a life of service. And so I don't know. I guess I'm going off on a tangent, but yeah, I think it's powerful to understand that we can assign meaning to things. And the cool thing is we can go back and reassign meaning to things. This is where that shift in those core beliefs comes from. That's what's so cool about this is in many ways it's kind of not too late to live a good childhood. So a lot of the unhappiness that a person experiences in childhood, even if the situation is horrible, the parent is horrible, all of these things are horrible. A lot of the pain that we're experiencing is because we're perceiving it from that mind of a child. And as the mind of a child, that child absorbs all of that abuse, all of that neglect, all of those things as a reflection of them. It's, oh my gosh, what's so wrong with me that my parent treats me this way or that these things are happening? As an adult, if we have a more empowered and accurate understanding of behavior and the world and all of these things, we can go back and look at these events and see it from that adult mindset of um, that what happened to me was not right, it was not fair, and it was absolutely horrific. But that wasn't a reflection of me. That was a reflection of my parent, or that was a reflection of the bully at school. That was a reflection of them. I don't have to own that. That doesn't have to define me. This doesn't have to continue to ruin my life. Like, I can choose what kind of meaning that I want to assign to this. And if you guys have, I don't know, read some of my stuff or um, whatever, and I talk about kind of the importance of um, some of the really important mindset shifts that I made over the years. This was before I ever came across the man's search for meaning. And I wish I would have read it years ago because I think that would have helped this aha moment come along a lot sooner. But I was at such a low place that I flirted with the idea of suicide all the time. And one night it was just this realization of, okay, like I've got to rein my thinking in because it's all over the place. And that's a very exhausting and terrifying way to live. And so the first thought was, okay, number one, I'm not going to end my life because of this. So just take that option, take suicide off the table. Not an option. It's not an option. It's not an option. So then the second thing was, I'm not going to let this ruin my life. And that was harder to accept as a decision because it felt like, but I don't know, like, but I feel like my life is ruined and how do I overcome all this? But then just making that decision of, no, I'm making the decision to not let this ruin my life. And then kind of making peace with that of, okay, well, then what would it look like? What would moving forward for me look like if I were to steer into that and decide to not let this ruin my life? And then that led to a lot a lot of, more empowered questions and a much better path to travel down. That was huge. Like those two things right there were huge. And then the third one was, okay, um, I am going to take my experiences and use them for my highest and greatest good. And then that gave me a sense of purpose and a sense of direction of what to do with that pain. Where I guess again before it was like a fire hose. It was just spraying everywhere, and there was no direction, there was no control. I mean, it literally was this feeling of, "Well, I don't know what will come of me." Um, you know, like I don't know. I just am I going to drown in my anger? Possibly. I just I was just so all over the place. So realizing, okay, take an action, moving towards my highest and greatest good. That put me on a positive path, gave me something to channel those intense feelings into. And then the fourth one was the realization of, okay, in time, I'm going to start using my pain towards the highest and greatest good of others. And that is what helped kind of complete that cycle. I like transmuting that pain into something powerful. And I think it's a very similar process that everybody goes through when when they really do work through their pain. So yeah, I hope that helps. I hope that helps somebody out there. And Huffle Mom, I am so sorry. Thank you for the live stream donation. Let me see if I can figure out. I missed your message with it. And how do I, you'd think I would know how to work YouTube. I don't. Uh, I guess, could you put your message in the chat so I can, mm, oh, okay. Gareth was saying, Eminem is also said to be borderline personality disorder. Yeah, there's a lot. Thank you. In part, this is related. Tomorrow night, we're gonna have book club again for the first time in a while. So, gonna get back in the swing of it. Tomorrow night, it'll be just me because this was kind of a spur of the moment decision. The book that I'll be discussing, it's Stop Walking on Eggshells, and it's about borderline personality disorder and kind of setting boundaries and kind of regaining control over your life if you've got a loved one with borderline personality disorder. So yeah, it's a I don't know. We'll see. We'll go through it. There's kind of a lot I have to say about it. A lot of things I agree with, a handful of things that I don't, and then a handful of things I think kind of need some more context to it. But in terms of borderline personality disorder, I guess I'll just say this real quick too. We were talking earlier about um, kind of with narcissists, pretty much everything is filtered through their ego, through that fragile ego. And there's oftentimes, especially if there's any type of disagreement or difference that others have with them or from them or what have you, it's a perceived attack. With a borderline personality disorder, that is more of there's a pervasive fear of abandonment and rejection. And so everything, because of that, uh, is filtered through that lens of rejection and abandonment. And uh, yeah, and we'll get more into that tomorrow night. It's tragic, but it's interesting. Thankfully, with borderline personality disorder, there are treatments out there, and uh, really a lot of it's recognizing these imbalances in a person's personality, and it is a big first step. And then doing the work of um, getting them balanced. And there's wonderful therapy out there. Dialectical behavioral therapy is kind of the go-to for borderline personality disorder. Um, and yeah, I think trauma and grief recovery is another one. And yeah, so we'll talk more about that tomorrow night. Um, yes, UNA says, will the text message for the channel also alert us for the book club? Yes, it will. So, and thank you for bringing that up too. So if you guys would like to be, would you like, if you would, if you would like to receive a text message when I go live for book club, for live streams, for whatnot, you can text the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number, or Dana Live, yes, all one word, to the number 22999. And you'll receive a text message when I go live. Book club, just so you know, it'll be tomorrow night. It'll be at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And like I said, this time it'll just be me. So yeah. Yeah. And if you were interested in some words of encouragement, this is a new thing we've started doing, which is, I think, really cool, is you can text the words I thrive to the number 22999. And then you're signed up to get text messages with words of encouragement. We do about 3 or so a week. And um, it's, yeah, it's nice. And of course, you can, there's no cost for any of this. The only thing to consider is your data. I cannot speak tonight. Your data plan on your phone is something to watch for, but you can unsubscribe anytime. So let's see here. Helpful Mom says, "Hey Dana, I have that book. I'd love to be your book buddy." Yeah, well, I hope that you can make it to book club tomorrow, and or message me, and yeah, we'll figure something out. Oh, you're so welcome. Huffle Mom says, "I really want to thank you for all the help you've given our family. I'll never forget it." Oh, that's awesome. Well, and because I would just want to thank you and Jack for being so open and um, I think such wonderful role models to show people, that you both of you have gone through so much, and like your level of self-awareness and everything, just everything that you role model, everything, that the openness with which you discuss your relationship and the challenges in your relationship, and everything that you do for me and for the group and for the chat is beyond appreciated. It really is. So thank you both for that. Casey asks, book club, what time? 6:30 p.m. tomorrow, Eastern Standard Time. Kayla was saying, I've been looking for a book to help shift my perspective on the shame and humiliation I'm stuck in. This stream has reminded me that hearing other stories can really help. Yeah, I think that's the power of groups in general. Is shame is one of those things. It can only exist it can only exist if there's a lack of validation and a lack of acceptance. And so shame exists in the darkness. It requires secrecy. It requires um, isolation. It requires that in order to exist. And so shining that light on it and hearing from other people of, oh yeah, I went through that too. or I can relate, uh, helps to really dissipate a lot of that, realizing, oh my gosh, no, no, you're a lot of these feelings, all of these feelings, the thoughts, the actions, all of it. Um, it's not. It's a very um, kind of very normal response to a very abnormal situation. That there's nothing profoundly like wrong or broken or deeply damaged with you. So yeah, and that can be very reassuring hearing that, because abusive situations are I mean, it's a meat grinder. It's an emotional meat grinder and leaves the person feeling very fragmented and very disoriented and very confused. Ava says, "Oh, it doesn't work for Canadians." That's interesting. It should. They said that it did. Okay, the valid point. No Punches says, sometimes shame is valid. Not all shame is unwarranted. Unwarranted shame is different. Yeah. I don't know. With that said, I don't know if shame is ever really helpful though. Because the difference is, okay, so like with guilt, it's the feeling, well, it's the feeling and the realization of I did something bad. Shame is I am bad. I don't, I just don't think shame is ever productive, because when we have such a limited, disempowering identity of I am bad, there's not a lot of room to turn that around. So I think it'd be more helpful for a person to identify with the behavior of, yeah, this behavior is really bad. And I honestly, I think for any healing to occur, there has to be that level of we can't have this huge degree of self-loathing if we're ever gonna, um, kind of make peace with ourselves, kind of a thing. So I don't know. I don't know. Those are, yeah. No Punch says, I get what you're saying, but narcissists experience guilt as shame. True, because they feel justified in their behavior and because their ego is so thin that it's the, but at the same time, I think they get rid of those feelings of shame very, very quickly. They don't allow, there's no room for that. That's when you see all of those really wild mental gymnastics. So it's, if it's the feeling of, if they're walking around, if anyone disagrees with them or criticizes them or whatever, if it's, they internalize it to such an extent that, oh my gosh, I am bad, which they can't accept, um, then they get rid of that. And they get rid of that by putting it on the other person. Right. So uh, yeah, like projecting that feeling onto somebody else. Oh, interesting. Yeah. No Punches says yes, agreed. They get rid of those feelings because they project and refuse responsibility. Yeah. I guess because really the room, for growth in terms of behavior change, I mean, there needs to be a certain level of guilt, right? Um, certain, if we've done something bad, it's appropriate that we feel bad that we've done something bad. It's a problem, there's kind of that difference between appropriate guilt and inappropriate guilt. Appropriate guilt is I did something bad, I feel bad. Inappropriate guilt is I did nothing bad, like, and I feel bad, such as I set a boundary and now I feel bad. Like that's inappropriate guilt because there's technically nothing to feel bad about. There's nothing wrong with setting a boundary. So Absolutely. Yeah, no punches says, but you cannot convince a narcissist that you accept them whole and not a particular action. They always feel put down. They always feel you put them down whole when you disagree with them. Right. Because the flip side of that is they can't just let a disagreement be a disagreement. They internalize it. Like you said, it's this feeling of, oh, well, then you think I'm stupid, right? If you don't agree with me, then you're saying I'm wrong. That there's something profoundly wrong with me, instead of not internalizing it and just saying like, hey man, I just don't agree with that thought you have, or the, whatever it might be. But yeah, they fly into a rage. It's pretty wild when you see somebody who um, can't handle ever being wrong. And it's sad too, because there's no growth. There's that complete lack of self-awareness there, and lack of introspection, and um, th- they just stagnate. It's pretty wild. So, okay, guys. Well, okay, real quick. Well, okay, it's a couple quick. Get Smita says, "Oh, so what I've been feeling my whole life is inappropriate guilt." Quite possibly, yeah. A lot of people do, especially if if I think it was what's his name, Dr. Gabor Mate. Uh, I don't think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Had made a comment once, something along the lines of, for children value connection over authenticity, and a healthy adult will value authenticity over connection. That is so well said. So the result of that for children, because they value connection first and foremost, is that any parts of themselves that others don't approve of or don't connect with, that child starts trying to erase. And how you see this play out is, if we hold on to that belief that the only way we don't make that shift, overvaluing authenticity over connection, if we're focused on connection first and by any means necessary, then we're erasing really key parts of ourselves, and including wants, needs, thoughts, feelings, boundaries, standards, deal breakers. And so then the result of that, so if we've been told that these core parts of who we are as people are wrong, then we're going to feel bad for that. And so then there's this feeling of guilt. Oh, I feel guilty for saying no. I feel guilty for not letting somebody borrow money, or for, not I feel guilty for not having limits with other people. And that's a problem. That's a big problem, because it's important that you have limits. It's where you start and end, and where another person starts and end. And without limits, there's only chaos and confusion. So, okay. Well, with that said, I think we're going to call it a night. And yeah, I guess we'll see you guys tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will talk about this book. It's Stop Walking on Eggshells, and talk about borderline personality disorder. So bring your questions and sign up for the text alerts if you'd like to be notified. It's Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. Okay. So take care. And if I don't see you at book club tomorrow, I will see you guys next week, Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay. So good night. And as always, lots of love to you. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you really can move forward and heal. So take care. And yeah, lots of light and love to you. Good night.